The wind off the Potomac was cold enough to cut through a coat, but not cold enough to make anyone leave. That was something I noticed as I stood at my father's grave, that the cold in a national cemetery feels different. It doesn't ask you to move. It just reminds you that you're still standing. There were no more than 10 people at the service. A chaplain, 2 soldiers for the rifle detail, a woman from the Veterans Administration I had never met before, my brother Marcus standing slightly apart from everyone like he was already calculating square footage, and me. That was the sum total of a life. My father would have said that was more than enough. He was Army. Retired after 22 years, most of it classified in ways he never explained. Some of it done in places he never named. He came back from Vietnam the same way he'd done everything else in his life, without ceremony, without complaint, without a single story anyone was allowed to hear. He moved us to a small house in Charlottesville, Virginia when I was 4. He worked as a maintenance supervisor at the university for 16 years after he retired. He mowed the lawn on Saturdays. He made his own bread on Sundays. He died in his sleep at 71, which his doctor called peaceful and which I called too quiet even for him. I was 29 when I buried him. My brother Marcus was 37. Our mother had been gone for 6 years by then. The rifle volley echoed across the headstones, and I felt something shift in my chest the way things do when a sound is too final. I folded my hands and stared at the carved letters of his name. Raymond Earl Calloway. Sergeant First Class, United States Army. That was when I heard the footsteps behind me. She was a woman in her mid-60s, silver-haired, wearing a dark wool coat with no insignia visible. She walked with the kind of deliberate steadiness that comes from years of measuring each step. She didn't look like a mourner. She looked like someone who had arrived with a purpose. She stopped beside me, close enough to speak without raising her voice. "Your father saved my son's life," she said. "I don't mean that as a figure of speech." I looked at her. "My name is Catherine Marsh," she said. "I served as U.S. ambassador to Austria for 11 years. I knew your father longer than that." She reached into her coat pocket and produced a small envelope, the kind that holds a card. On it, written in careful ink, was a name and a Vienna address. "When you're ready," she said, "go there. Use his full name at the door. Raymond Earl Calloway. Don't shorten it." She paused. "They'll know exactly who he was." Before I could ask a single question, she pressed the envelope into my hand, nodded once at the headstone the way someone nods at a person they respect, and walked away through the rows of white marble. Marcus appeared at my shoulder almost immediately, as if he had been watching the exchange from a distance. "Who was that?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I said. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Well, whatever it is, we should probably talk about the house." I didn't answer him. That evening I drove back to Charlottesville alone. Marcus had a hotel, which meant he'd planned to stay and discuss things I didn't want to discuss yet. I let myself into my father's house with the key I'd carried for years, the one he'd had cut for me after Mom died so I'd always have a way in. The house was exactly as he'd left it. Bread on the counter under a cloth, his reading glasses folded on the side table. A library book overdue, I noticed on the arm of his chair. His boots lined up at the door with the kind of precision that had nothing to do with habit and everything to do with character. I sat in his chair for a long time without turning on any lights. Then I went through the house the way you do when someone is gone and you're trying to understand them better than you managed to while they were still there to ask. I opened drawers. I found the things you'd expect: old receipts, insurance paperwork, a pen collection he'd never mentioned having. In the closet off the hallway, behind his good jacket and a box of holiday ornaments, there was a military-issue document case with a combination lock I didn't know. I left it there that night. I wasn't ready. Marcus showed up the next morning before I'd finished my coffee. He didn't knock hard. He'd always had this way of entering spaces like he was already owed them. "There's not much here," he said, looking around. He meant it factually, not cruelly. That made it worse somehow. "He wasn't a collecting type," I said. "He wasn't a lot of things." Marcus poured himself coffee without asking. That was another habit of his. I looked up the house value. Market's decent in this area. If we list it by spring, he died 4 days ago. I know when he died. Marcus set his mug down. "I'm just being practical. You always acted like practicality was something to be ashamed of." "I always acted like there was a time for it." He looked at me evenly. "We're not the same, Sarah. You stayed close to him. I didn't. That doesn't mean I don't have a stake in what he left. I'm aware of that. Good. He picked up his mug again. So let's be fair about it. After he left, I looked at the envelope from the woman at the cemetery. Catherine Marsh. Ambassador. Vienna address. I held it for a long time at the kitchen table where my father had done his crossword puzzles every Sunday morning without fail. The pencil worn down to nothing before he'd ever switch it for a new one. I called the number on the card that afternoon. A man answered in English with a precise Austrian accent. I gave my father's full name, Raymond Earl Calloway. There was a pause, not a short one. Yes, the man said. We have been in contact with the American embassy. We anticipated someone would call. Another pause. Can you travel? I told him I would need a week. He said that was fine. He asked me to bring identification and the death certificate. He gave no other explanation. I booked the flight that night. I didn't tell Marcus I was going. I told him I was dealing with some estate paperwork out of state, which was true enough. He texted back immediately, "Don't do anything without me." I put the phone face down on the table. Before I left, I went back to the hallway closet. The document case with the combination lock. I tried every combination I could think of my mother's birthday, his service number from what little I'd pieced together, my own birthday. Nothing. I took the case with me. I found the combination in the bread box. He had written it on a small piece of paper tucked inside an empty prescription bottle, which he had wedged beneath the breadboard where it lay flat and invisible. The number was my mother's birthday, rearranged day, year, month, not the way anyone would try it naturally. That was him entirely. Nothing obvious, everything intentional. Inside the document case, a passport with a worn cover, pages filled with stamps from Austria, Switzerland, Germany, Portugal, trips going back nearly 15 years, none of which he had ever mentioned to me. A folded sheet of paper with names, 18 of them beside dollar amounts and dates. A second piece of paper covered in his precise handwriting that said only, level, that word. I'd heard him use it exactly once, when I was maybe 12 and had gotten into a fight with a girl at school over something stupid. I came home furious and my father listened to the whole story and then said, "Keep it level, Sarah." I'd thought he meant stay calm. Standing in that kitchen holding his handwriting, I wasn't sure anymore that was all he'd meant. The flight to Vienna was 11 hours. I slept for 2 of them. The city, when I arrived, was gray and elegant in equal measure. Stone buildings, clean streets, a kind of unhurried dignity that reminded me, strangely, of the way my father moved through rooms. Nothing flashy, everything considered. The address on the card was not a bank in the traditional sense, no glass tower, no revolving door. It was a building on a side street near the First District, its facade old stone with a modest brass plate beside the door. The plate said only, Calloway Marsh Foundation, Est, 2007. My father's name, on a building in Vienna. Inside, I gave my name at a small reception desk. A woman in her 50s with dark-framed glasses stood and extended her hand. She introduced herself as Dr. Heller, the foundation's director. She was warm but efficient, the way people are when they've been expecting a conversation they know will be significant. She led me to a private meeting room. Wood paneling, a small table, 2 chairs, a window overlooking a narrow courtyard. She set a folder in front of me. "Your father established this foundation in 2007, she said, in partnership with Ambassador Marsh, who provided considerable early support. The focus has been specific children of American service members killed in action. Educational support, primarily. University funding. Vocational training. Some medical assistance for families with disabilities traced to service-related exposures." I looked at the folder without opening it yet. "He named it after himself?" I asked. "Ambassador Marsh insisted on it," Dr. Heller said. "He resisted for 2 years. She told me he finally agreed when she pointed out that children of soldiers deserved to know that another soldier had thought of them." I opened the folder. The numbers were organized clearly. Total assets, current holdings, annual disbursement records going back 17 years. I read the figure at the top of the page twice before I believed it. $8,400,000. "This can't be right," I said. "It is accurate," she replied. I set the folder down. "He worked maintenance at a university. He also invested," she said. "Quietly, over a long period. He worked with a firm here beginning in the early 1990s. Conservative strategy, consistent contributions, compounding over decades. He was, by all accounts, extraordinarily disciplined. She paused. He also declined several opportunities to draw from the principal for personal use. That last sentence sat in the room for a moment. There are 47 current beneficiaries, she continued. 11 active scholarships, a medical fund that has assisted 23 families in the past 4 years alone. She slid a second envelope across the table. This was left with us to be given only to you, and only in person, after his death. My name was on the front in his handwriting. Raymond's daughter. Not Sarah. Raymond's daughter. He'd always done that when something mattered referred to relationships rather than names. I didn't open it in the room. I asked for a moment alone. Dr. Heller nodded and stepped out. The paper inside was lined notebook paper, the kind he'd always used. If you're reading this, then I didn't manage to explain it while I still could. I should have. I kept waiting for the right time, and there is never a right time for this kind of conversation, which is something I knew and kept ignoring. I didn't build this because I wanted recognition. I built it because I knew men who died without anyone making sure their children were taken care of, and that stayed with me for 50 years, and I had to do something about it or I couldn't sleep. I chose you as the successor trustee because you listen. Not because you're better than your brother, because you know how to be still when things are loud. That's rare. Don't apologize for it. The word is level. It means you don't go up when things feel good, and you don't go down when they feel bad. It means you stay exactly who you are, regardless of what the number says at the top of that page. I raised you to be level. I think you are. Take care of what I built. And take care of your brother if you can. I folded the letter and held it in my hands for a long time. The courtyard outside the window was very quiet. I called Marcus from the hotel that evening. He answered on the first ring. "How's the paperwork?" he said. "I'm in Vienna," I told him. A long pause. Vienna. Austria. "I know where Vienna is, Sarah. What are you doing in Vienna?" "Dad built something," I said. "I need to explain it to you when I'm back." "Built what?" "A foundation. For veterans' families." Another pause. Longer this time. "How much are we talking about?" I told him. He inhaled sharply. Then, quietly. He never said a word. "No," I said. He didn't. When I landed back in Charlottesville 3 days later, Marcus's truck was in my father's driveway. He was at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad in front of him. He had the same expression he got at holiday dinners when he thought someone was getting a larger portion than him, measured, controlled, aware. "Sit down," he said. I set my bag down. This is still his house. "Sit down, Sarah." I sat. He pushed the legal pad toward me. He'd written numbers or tried to. Half of what he'd written were question marks. 8.4 million, he said. "Split between 47 people and you." "I'm not a beneficiary," I said. "I'm the trustee." "What does that mean?" "Practically. It means I oversee the foundation. I make decisions about disbursements. I maintain the structure. And the money? Supports the beneficiaries. Educational costs. Medical needs. Exactly as he designed it." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "And what do we get?" "He helped you," I said. "More than once. I've seen the records." His jaw tightened. "That was different. That was family." "These are families," I said, "of men who died in service. I know what they are. I'm asking about us." "There's a provision," I said carefully. He included a family clause. "I can structure support for you, debt assistance, financial counseling, defined distributions tied to progress, tied to conditions." "Yes." He looked at me for a long time. "You'd really manage my finances. I'd help stabilize them. There's a difference." Marcus stood and paced to the window. Outside, the maple in the front yard was bare. He'd climbed that tree when he was 7 and broken his wrist coming down, and our father had driven him to the hospital at midnight without once saying he'd told him not to climb it. "He picked you," Marcus said to the window. "He picked me for a responsibility. That's different from being picked. It doesn't feel different." "I know." He turned. "I want an attorney to review the documents." "I expected that. I'm not the villain here, Sarah. I never said you were." He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. "He loaned me money 3 times, he said quietly. Never once made me feel small about it. I'll give him that. He paused at the door. But this doesn't feel like love. It feels like a test I didn't know I was taking. He left. The house was quiet again, the way only a house can be when the person it was built around isn't in it anymore. I sat at the table for a while with my father's letter. Then I opened the document case and looked at the list of 18 names he'd kept with the passport. Some had dollar amounts beside them, specific, significant. Some had only dates. All of them, I understood now, had been helped quietly, without recognition, over a span of years. He had never told me. He had never told anyone. He had just been level. Marcus filed within a month. His attorney, a probate specialist from Richmond, submitted a formal challenge, citing inadequate disclosure of foreign assets in the domestic will, potential undue influence by Ambassador Marsh, and failure to provide equitable distribution to surviving heirs. The language was precise and bloodless, the way legal language always is when it's describing something that isn't. I hired Thomas Wren, an estate attorney in Charlottesville who had silver hair and a calm voice, and who had, I later learned, served 2 tours in the Gulf before law school. He reviewed everything in a single afternoon. "Your father was meticulous," he said. He set the folder down. "The trust predates any claim by 15 years. The foreign assets were referenced, not itemized, in the domestic will that's standard practice for international structures. There's no evidence of undue influence. Ambassador Marsh provided co-founding support, not direction." He folded his hands. "This will not succeed." "Marcus isn't malicious," I said. Thomas looked at me without judgment. "Most people in these situations aren't. That doesn't change what they file." The first hearing was in a courtroom in Charlottesville, with beige walls and fluorescent lighting and the mundane texture of a room where difficult things get reduced to procedure. Marcus sat at the opposite table in a gray suit I recognized as the one he'd worn to our mother's funeral. He didn't look at me when I came in. He looked tired. His attorney argued that the Austrian Foundation represented assets that should have been fully disclosed and equitably divided under Virginia inheritance law, that my designation as trustee constituted preferential treatment, and that the structure itself had been designed to circumvent fair distribution. Thomas responded evenly. "The trust was legally established under both U.S. and Austrian law. It was documented, independently verified, and had been active for 17 years. There was no evidence of undue influence, no evidence of concealment with intent to deceive, and no legal basis for the equal distribution claim, given that the assets in question had never been personal property. They had always been held in trust for designated beneficiaries." The judge requested additional documentation and scheduled a follow-up. Outside the courthouse, Marcus finally spoke to me. "You could just end this," he said. "How? Dissolve the structure. Divide the principal. Those 47 families depend on it." He looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "Sarah, it's $8 million. Dad is gone. Nobody's going to come after you if you simplify it." "He would know," I said. Marcus shook his head. "You're doing that thing where you turn him into something larger than he was." "I'm doing the thing where I try to understand who he actually was," I said, "which takes longer than I expected." He didn't respond to that. The second hearing brought the Foundation record 17 years of disbursement summaries, clean and consistent, co-signed by Dr. Heller and audited annually by an independent Vienna firm. The records showed 47 families receiving ongoing support. They showed a scholarship fund that had put 22 students through college. They showed a medical assistance line that had covered specialized care for veterans' dependents in 11 states. The third hearing, Ambassador Marsh testified. She came in without ceremony. The same wool coat, the same measured walk I remembered from the cemetery. She took the oath and sat down and answered questions with the patience of someone who had navigated harder rooms than this. Marcus's attorney tried to establish that she had steered my father toward the foundation structure as a way of minimizing his estate for personal reasons. She responded to that without raising her voice. "Raymond Calloway came to me with the concept already formed," she said. "He had kept a list of names for years, men he'd served with, men whose children had been left without support. He asked for my help because he trusted my knowledge of international law and Austrian institutions. I did not suggest the structure. I helped him execute it." She paused. "He was one of the most clear-minded people I have ever worked with in 40 years of public service. No one influenced Raymond Calloway. He was finished thinking before most people started." There was a small but perceptible shift in the room after that. When the judge ruled, she was brief and direct. The trust was valid. The challenge was dismissed. No fraud, no undue influence, no basis for redistribution. Just like that, outside on the courthouse steps, Marcus stood by himself for a long moment. I waited. "You weren't going to move," he said finally. "No." He looked at the sky. "I keep thinking about all the years he drove that old truck. Clipped coupons. Wouldn't fix the gutters until they were actually failing. And the whole time, I said. "It doesn't make me feel better," he said. "If that's what you're waiting for, I'm not waiting for anything." He turned to look at me. "Do you ever wish you'd just let me have it?" "No." He gave a short, exhausted sound. "Even when I sued you? Especially then." That surprised him. He almost smiled. "I'm going to offer the structured plan again," I said. "Debt assistance, an advisor, conditional distributions, no blank check, no conditions designed to humiliate you, just structure." "You sound like him." "I'll take that." He was quiet for a moment. "I wanted him to be proud of me," he said. "I know." He never said it. "He didn't say it to me either," I said. "But he showed it differently to different people. You were always one of his, Marcus. He just didn't know how to speak your language." His eyes were red at the edges now, though he held himself together in the way men from our family always did, by staying very still. "I want the attorney fees covered from the family clause," he said. "That's reasonable." He nodded once. He walked to his truck without saying anything else. He didn't slam the door. That evening I drove back to my father's house and sat in his chair in the dark. I reread his letter twice. I took the small piece of paper that said level from the document case and set it on the side table where his reading glasses usually sat. Steady had been the word in the video I'd seen once about another father like mine, another daughter like me. My father's word had been different. Level. Same idea. Different vocabulary. Both of them had understood something the rest of us spend entire lives chasing, that the quality of a person is not in the size of what they announce, but in the consistency of what they do when no one is watching. He'd done it for 17 years without telling anyone. The next morning, Marcus showed up with a box of his father's things he had taken from the house the week before. Small things. A framed photo, a coffee mug, a compass from the army. He set the box on the table. "I shouldn't have taken these without asking," he said. "Keep them," I said. He looked at the box. "He kept everything level," he said quietly. "All those years. I thought that meant he didn't care. I thought quiet meant indifferent." So did I, for a while. Marcus sat down at the table, not like he was in a meeting this time, like he was just tired and had nowhere else to be. "I'll do the counseling," he said. "The structured thing. I'm not promising I'll like it. I'm not asking you to like it. I just need it to not feel like charity." "It isn't charity," I said. "It's the family clause he built into the trust specifically so I could help you. He thought of you. He planned for you. He just couldn't figure out how to do it without conditions, because conditions were the only language he trusted." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "He really kept a list of names," he said, "for 50 years. In his handwriting, in the document case, 18 names. Men he served with. Men whose children needed someone." Marcus exhaled slowly. He looked at the compass he'd brought back in the box. He picked it up and turned it in his hand the way you do with something you're trying to understand. "You really went to Vienna," he said. "Alone, in November. It was very gray and very beautiful. And he built all that. And he never mentioned it once." Marcus set the compass down. "I thought he was tight," he said. "All those years watching him clip coupons and drive that truck. I thought he was holding out on us, being small. But he wasn't being small." He paused. "He was just being quiet." Neither of us said anything for a while. Outside, the maple in the front yard was still bare. The light coming through the kitchen window was the low winter light that makes everything look like a photograph. It didn't feel like victory in that room. It didn't feel like resolution either. Exactly. It felt like the beginning of understanding a person I should have understood sooner. That's the thing about quiet people. They don't give you the information in advance. They give you the example, and you have to work out the meaning afterward, sometimes years afterward, sometimes standing in a kitchen in winter holding a letter written in block letters on lined notebook paper by a man who made his own bread and drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it and had, without ever once asking for credit, built something that would outlast him by decades. A year after the court dismissed Marcus's claim, the two of us flew to Vienna together. It wasn't required. No ceremony, no agenda. I had a quarterly meeting with Dr. Heller and Marcus asked if he could come. I said yes. We sat in the same meeting room I'd sat in alone 11 months earlier. Dr. Heller presented the annual report. 3 new scholarships awarded that fall. A family in Georgia had received medical transport funds after their son, who had a service-related disability inherited from his father's exposure in Fallujah, needed specialized care in Baltimore. A widow in Oregon had kept her house because her mortgage had been quietly brought current. Marcus listened without saying anything. He read through the report the way he would read a business document, carefully, methodically. Afterward, when Dr. Heller stepped out, he sat looking at the folder. He never met most of these people, Marcus said. No. He just decided they deserved to be okay. Yes. Marcus closed the folder. He stopped. Started again. I told my financial counselor about this. The whole story. She said something I keep thinking about. What did she say? She said, "It sounds like he was rich in a way that had nothing to do with the money." Marcus looked at me. I thought that was just something people say. But I think she was right. We walked along the river that afternoon, the Danube Canal running cold and gray beside us the same way the Potomac had the day of the funeral. Some waters look the same regardless of where you are. Marcus had completed 7 months of the structured plan. His debt was down 40%. He'd sold the second car he didn't need and closed 2 credit lines that had been open for a decade collecting interest. He had not become a different person. He had become a steadier version of the one he'd always been. That felt like the right outcome. Not transformation. Just level. I was wrong about him, Marcus said, somewhere along the riverbank. I want to say that out loud, somewhere he might hear it, if that's how it works. I didn't answer right away. I think he heard everything, I said finally. He just didn't react to most of it. That was the whole point. We stood there a while, watching the water move. Before we left Vienna, I went back to the foundation building alone for a few minutes. I stood in the small courtyard outside the meeting room window and looked at the building the way I hadn't let myself look the first time. The brass plate with his name, the stone facade, the ordinary-looking door behind which, in filing cabinets and investment ledgers and a folder with 18 names, the evidence of a life lived at a specific frequency was organized and intact. He had been a quiet man, not a small one. There is a difference between those things that I am still learning, even now. Even a year later. The more I work with the trust, making decisions about disbursements, fielding inquiries from families I've never met, signing documents that bear my name beside his, the more I understand what he was trying to teach me without ever scheduling a lesson. You don't measure a life by its volume. You measure it by its consistency. He mowed the lawn on Saturdays. He made bread on Sundays. He wrote a letter he never expected to give me in person. He kept a list for 50 years. He kept it level. If you've ever sat in a quiet house after a funeral and wondered whether the person you lost had depths you never reached, I want you to know that some people are built that way on purpose. They don't shout their goodness. They just maintain it, year after year, invisible and consistent, like something structural inside a wall you've always leaned against without thinking about what holds it up. That's who my father was. That's what he left behind. Not money, though there is that too. Not a name on a building, though the building is real. What he left was proof that it's possible to live quietly and still change things, to be ordinary by every outward measure and extraordinary in every hidden one, to give without needing the giving to be seen. If you have someone like that in your life, call them this week. Tell them you see it. Don't wait for a letter written for after. And if you believe that the most powerful things are often the most silent ones, I hope you'll stay with this channel. Tell me in the comments about someone who lived level, who built something without any noise. Those stories deserve to be heard. Because the greatest legacies aren't always the ones that arrive with fanfare. Sometimes they arrive on a brass plate on a side street in Vienna, with your father's name on it, and nobody around to see your face when you finally understand what he'd been doing all along.